for those that he had introduced me, but I am Katy Emerson. I'm Executive Vice President of Customer Success at Suzy. And for anyone who's unfamiliar with Suzy, we are an end-to-end consumer insights platform that is powered by AI to integrate quant, qual, and high-quality audiences, all within one single connected research cloud. So we are here today to talk about mastering brand relevance and cultural connectivity. And so we're just gonna, like I said, we're gonna wrap up kind of what we talked about from this morning and take a look at some trends and some consumer sentiments about what makes brands relevant. So what we're looking to uncover today is what makes a brand relevant in the eyes of their core consumer. What does that even mean, relevancy? Does it mean that brands need to be tapped in to every single trend? Absolutely not. And keep up with the rapidly speeding cycle of consumer change. And of course, you guys know the answer to that is no. Brands don't get to decide what's relevant to consumers. They're the ones who are really, truly in the driver's seat. And so they are going to be the ones to choose the brands that are right for them, and they are the ones that are relevant to their values. So is that it? That's the lesson. You guys can all go to lunch. Certainly not, but in some ways, yes, right? The biggest piece of advice that I can give you all today is really to stop looking so much outwards and start looking inwards. And so while it's important to understand how different demographics really engage with brands, and you know, we all need to obviously be adaptable to change, it's also important to trust your consumer and really listen to what your consumer is saying to you. We don't tell people what's relevant to them. They're the ones who are in the driver's seat. Like I said, they're the ones who choose our brands. So by and large, they're choosing brands that align with their core values. So 82% of consumers want the brands that they support to align with their values. And what else can you do to maintain relevance for your audience? So here at Suzy, we use a mix of both consumer and cultural research to provide you 5 lessons, again, that I will quickly run through for you today to help your brands maintain relevance with your consumers. Okay, so our first trend, sorry, Lance, we're gonna get your drinking game going here, is of course around authenticity, and authenticity being absolutely everything. But why is it so important, and why does it come up so much today in the conversation? It's really nice to feel that your brand has a distinct point of view, and there's also loads of quantifiable business results that we can glean from brands that are authentic. The example that I have up here on the screen is actually one of my favorite examples of brand authenticity. And this is a campaign that the tourism group of Nebraska ran a couple years ago. And they took a bold statement, so it's funny, but it's bold and it's daring. And they showed the state of Nebraska with a tagline that said, honestly, it's not for everybody. Okay? So here's the impact of that campaign. The state senator, first of all, hated this campaign, so much so that he tried to take this independent agency and make it public so he could have a little bit more control. But I talked about those quantifiable business results. What this also did is for the consumers who saw this campaign, they got them thinking. It really sparked their curiosity. They were like, well, maybe, is it for me? Is this something that, is it a state that I should go to? Should I go check it out? And so it had that impact of, and again, do I have any Cornhuskers in the room? I don't. Okay, so I'm not going to offend anyone, so it's fine. But I have been to Nebraska, and it is lovely, and it's fun. But anyways, it sparked their curiosity. It got them thinking, should I go there? But the results were very interesting in that it had an uptick in the website traffic. It had an uptick in the amount of people that were requesting travel guides to Nebraska. And most importantly, they had a 20% increase in their tourism tax from 2021 to 2022. It also took Nebraska from being the least likely state that people wanted to visit, and actually they went into the 45th section, number 45. So they rised 5 whole points there. That's just a great example of a brand being super authentic, understanding, honestly, we're not for everybody. Our next lesson is about catching the cultural moments. So you've all heard the term about riding the wave. And I'm not talking about mental health here. I'm actually physically talking about surfing and riding waves. So quick show of hands again Anyone gone surfing before? Okay, keep those hands up. Keep the hands up. Who was good at it the first time you did it? Okay. Oh, someone back there a little confident. Okay, love it. Love it. So anyways, surfing is one of those sports that takes hours and hours and hours of practice. And guess what? All those hours spent practicing, there's very, very few waves that come along for you to catch. But when they do, you've spent those hours and you can go ahead and ride that wave when they come. I think we heard an amazing case study on this morning when it came to our ketchup and seemingly ranch. It's actually an amazing case study in this very phenomenon. We're in Women's History Month right now, right? And there are plenty of brands that try and jump on the bandwagon in Women's History Month and come off super inauthentic. There's a ton of brands who put up a pride flag for 1 week in the month of June. And guess what? Consumers can sniff that out. If you don't have activity on social, every single, around those, they're smarter than ever, consumers are, and they will call you out. They will sniff that out. More than anything, it comes across as inauthentic. So really, instead, just make sure that, as we learned from the team this morning, you ride those waves when they keep coming, and keep your fingers on the pulse of your brand all year long. It can't just be a moment in time and trying to jump on the bandwagon. It needs to be something that is done every single day. All right, so we have a lot of legacy brands in the room. And what do these brands have in common? I'm going to answer the question. But they consistently deliver on brand relevance. So their audiences accept when they make statements about cultural moments. They trust them. And as I mentioned on the previous slide, they make changes that feel right for their consumer base. So I have Dunkin' Donuts up on the screen here. And I think that this is a really great example of a legacy brand that was able to achieve avoiding legacy brand sameness. So for years and years, people refer to it as Dunkin'. Hey man, I'm going to Dunkin'. Oh, I love Dunkin'. Will you grab me something at Dunkin'? Let's get donuts at Dunkin'. And even you guys are all probably very familiar with the tagline of America runs on Dunkin'. All of that happened before the true rebrand happened in 2019. So they had a very successful job. They also kept their iconic orange and pink coloring as well as the signature font. So while the donuts name dropped, their brand relevance didn't. Here's an example and a cautionary tale for everyone in the room, in case you're not familiar with this flop. But this was a case where brand legacy really, they needed that sameness, and they didn't pay attention to what was so important about their key brand. And this was a launch that happened back in 2009 with Tropicana. And it seemingly kind of came out of the blue, where suddenly, no longer on shelf was this original packaging on the left, which showed that brand iconic freshness, that orange with that green straw that consumers knew and loved. Instead, they went for a more modern look. They went for something a little bit more minimalistic. And if you look closely, it's a little glass of OJ. It looks a little bit like a mimosa. Should hit with consumers, but it really didn't. And again, there was quantifiable results to that, in that they saw a 20% drop in sales in the first couple of weeks. Now, people didn't stop buying orange juice. They started buying their competitors. And so this is a brand who also recognized exactly what they did and were able to change back their logo and their packaging very, very swiftly. But they could have avoided all of that by really thinking and staying true to what made their brand so iconic and loved by their consumers. So as far as finding your omnichannel influencers, we talked a little bit about this morning, and I loved the example from our friend at Ferrera that he gave, as far as 51% of consumers engage with brands that they deem to be authentic via social media. So of course, consumers, they are looking for authenticity, both from the brands as well as the influencers that they're working with. So gone are the days of those major influencers who have loads and loads and loads of brand deals, and it's super clear that they don't use the product. Those are people that, just aren't getting my following anymore. They're getting a quick swipe through. So brands need to work with influencers that are authentically aligned with their products. And I think most importantly, it's about building an omni-channel marketing campaign. So influencers are not meant to just post on their own page, but how can you bring them into your brand page? I think Brian talked about this as well. How can you make them part of your brand ambassador campaign? How can you bring cohesion to the marketing campaign that you are putting out there? This is really going to help as you're looking at bringing in and finding influencers that have shared values with your brand. If you don't do this, you obviously risk losing relevance with your consumers. All right, and my final tip today is around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Brands that preach DEI to their consumers but have all white leadership or all white boardroom members are going to quickly lose relevance with their audience. You can't say one thing and then do another. People will sniff that out very, very, very quickly. So one brand that does a very good job of this and is working very hard at this and backing this up is Johnson & Johnson. So their global diversity and inclusion vision is for every person to use their unique experiences, abilities, and backgrounds together to spark solutions that create a better, healthier world. So they have 12 different employee resource groups with the goals of having 50% women and 35% multicultural management position, 35% racial diversity in managed positions by next year. So this is a brand who, again, is preaching this very well, and we all here can be confident that when they're releasing campaigns that are speaking to different audience sectors, that you believe them. Their brand is being nurtured from the inside out. All right, now we've shared core values and consumers associate with brand relevance. How can brands maintain authenticity to stay relevant? It's important for brands to start building equity with their consumers from the very beginning. So for all the legacy brands in the room, you guys obviously know this. You know who your consumer is and what's important to them. And the next step is really to be thinking about exploring partnerships that are with other brands or other influencers that are relevant to your audience, but also align with your company's core values. And for the challenger brands in the room, finding your sense of identity early and listening to your consumer base is key. So my final word of advice, and then you guys can all go grab some lunch, is really that brand relevance isn't about showing that you're relevant to people. It's about being authentic and true to what makes your brand unique. So thank you so much for having me up here. I appreciate it.